Okay, thank you. All right, so now video check. If you can see me, can you type bright and clear? If you can see me, please, can you type bright and clear? All right, so excellent. Okay, so I'm very happy to be here again with the DSN, and I'm going to be presenting on data visualization and data storytelling generally. And I hope that the audience is going to gain a lot of knowledge from my session today within the next maybe 45 minutes to 1 hour. So I just want to do a very quick audience profile check. So if you have ever created any charts before, can I see you type yes in the chat section? And if you haven't created any chart before, can you type no? Okay, so I see a lot of yeses. Some of them are big. I see a couple of no's. Okay, all right. So I want to start by saying that if I see any no in the comment section, it's probably maybe a baby, right? So I believe we all have created some kind of charts before somehow. So I hope that I will be able to prove that to you during the course of my presentation. So I'm really not sure how far I will be able to go yet today, but I'm going to start with some theory of data visualization because, you know, whatever we do that has some sense of practical procedures are also backed by theory. So for everyone who have created data visualization before, you know, we've seen a lot of visualizations online here and there. And sometimes it seems like people don't put in enough thought into their visualization, probably because they don't understand that theory, and maybe they still don't know how important data visualization is, or they don't know what exactly data visualization is meant to solve, or the kind of problem that visualization is meant to solve. So I'm going to share my screen and run through my slides first. Just let me quickly do a time check on myself so that I can manage my time properly. So data visualization and data storytelling are two things that go hand in hand. And I believe that in 2023, all of us understand what data means. And as much as possible, I will also be transiting between my PowerPoint slides to my whiteboard because I like to write a lot as well. Okay, so we all know what data is, and we all know what data what value data can bring to us. Now, there is really no amount of emphasis that we can lay on the importance of data visualization and data storytelling, because at the end of the day, the whole essence of analyzing data, the whole essence of processing data, in fact, the essence of collecting and storing data in the first place, not to talk about the processing, not to talk about the communication, is for us to be able to make intelligent decisions, right? Now, sometimes, depending on the context of where we are speaking to, we like to use the word intelligent business decisions, right? So we also have to remember that not all data analysis is meant for the business. Okay, but the most important thing there is we can always use data to back whatever decisions that we want to make. And data visualization and data analysis are things that help us to make sure that those our decisions are of high quality and they can really help us to achieve our objectives. So Emmanuel already introduced me, but I think it's also good for you to hear from the horse's mouth as well. So my name is Ahmed Oyelowo. And the reason why I have to introduce myself is so that you can hear it from me the way I call my name. However, I can accept that you pronounce it anyhow that you can, in order for you not to bite your tongue, as I always say, right? So just in case you like to hear it again, I understand that many people like to hear me say it, right? So my name is Ahmed Oyelowo, and I am a Power BI trainer and consultant. That's the one I intend to project to you today. I'm also a Microsoft MVP for the data platform, and I currently manage Foresight BI and analytics. So in my outline today, we are going to be covering, just to talk generally about data visualization and data storytelling. And then I will also tell you about the ingredients of data storytelling. And we'll also look at how do you select the right charts? How do you select the right visuals for your project or for your for your storytelling generally. So as we have mentioned earlier, the whole essence of analyzing data is for us to be able to communicate insight from the data to improve our decision making. Sometimes they are business decisions, sometimes they are not business decisions. So for example, even in the world of sports today, you know that there is a lot of data analytics that is involved in sports, which is one of the reasons why for the guys in the house, for example, I think a new football season started this past weekend, and I'm sure even the ladies will be aware as well, because you know the buzz is always there, the social media is always making a lot of noise once it is football season. I'm sure you are aware that you know there is a particular aspect of the game that the fans also get engaged in, that is called FPL. So how many of us know what FPL is? If you know what FPL is, can I see you signify in the chat section? FPL, how many of us know FPL? Okay. All right, so FPL basically is a fantasy Premier League. So for the benefit of the ladies in the house and some other guys who probably do not follow football. So football is one of those sports out there, not one of those sports really, is like the most popular sports out there. And, you know, fans are able to select different football players across different teams every weekend. And then the real life performances of those players will earn them points based on the players they select, right? So let's assume that Ahmed is one of the players that play for Manchester City. Then you will realize that maybe if Ahmed is able to score 3 goals during the game week, then whoever has selected Ahmed in their own fantasy Premier League team is going to have a lot of points, you know, things like that, okay? So now somebody was asking me, a very good friend of mine and a boss of mine as well in the industry, was asking me just on Friday that, hey, Ahmed, the new FPL season is going to start now, you know, and I told the person I'm no longer interested in FPL, and I've also started to lose interest in football. Now, the reason why I started to lose interest in football, ironically, is because there's been a lot of involvement of analytics in football. So which goes to mean that for me, as far as I'm concerned, the game is no longer purely entertaining anymore, because analytics has come in to the game, and that has also helped in bringing in a lot of tactical changes to the game. So if you go to watch a football match these days, it's just a battle of tactics. It's no longer a battle of football anymore. So that's one of the reasons why for example, I started to lose a lot of interest in football. So which is why I say that we use data not only in the sense of business, we also use data in any other aspect where we need to make decisions, right? So data visualization and data storytelling allows us to make sense of data, and then gives us the ability to communicate the insights from those visuals. Now, usually we make use of charts. Now, we make use of charts usually because whenever we talk about data visualization, the thing that usually comes to everybody's mind is charts, charts, and charts. But you have to understand that, you know, visuals can be made up of a lot of things and not only chart, as long as it is something that you can see, right? So for example, you know, in this class right now, we are on the Zoom class, you are looking at my PowerPoint, that's some visuals. You are also seeing me in video, that is also a visual as well. So in as much as we are trying to convert data from its raw format into something that is graphical, that easily tells a story, that people can easily relate with, then we start to talk about data visualization and data storytelling. And you know, the end goal is for us to support our decision making, be it business, be it football, be it any other thing that you can think about. Okay. Now, the ingredients of data storytelling. If I ask you to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear of stories, before you list like 5 different things, you probably will tell me about storybooks, and you also probably will tell me about movies as well. So the thing about stories is that they are things that we are able to connect with more when they are graphical. That's why we have movies, right? And, you know, movies, I believe, is what is called motion graphics, isn't it? I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I think movies or videos generally can also be regarded as motion graphics. That is like a graphic that is taken in motion continuously. So if you think about a photo, so if you continue to take photograph of me and all of my body movements right now, if you just continue to flash the camera, you know, but, you know, you are taking photos, if you flip through those photos like that, it's going to look basically like a video. So videos are just like photos that are continuous, and photos are photographs. So if you want to understand data storytelling better, it is easy for us to relate it with the entertainment industry as well. Most especially, we can easily relate it to movies, okay? So the ingredients that are required before anybody can create any data story are, number one, the storyteller, which is typically a data analyst or any other person basically that is trying to convey information with data. And then the second ingredient is going to be the cast, okay? So the storyteller is more or less like the producer of the movie or the person that writes the story for the movie. So in this case, it can be the analyst, it can be me, it can be you, it can be any other person that wants to process data and that wants to use the data to convey information to some people to improve their decision making. But the cast that is going to be used by this producer or by this storyteller is basically the data that is available. So data sets are usually there and they all have features, different kind of features. So you can assume that each of the features in the data set can serve as a cast or can serve as an actor that you are going to use for your visualization, okay? Then we'll also have the story and the scenes. So the storyteller needs to write a story about what he or she is trying to communicate. And then once you write the story, you are going to need the actors to shoot the scenes for the story, isn't it? Because when you watch a movie, movies are usually not just one scene. So they are separate scenes that end up forming the entire movie at the end of the day. So you can see every singular scene as a visual, okay? Because when we're talking about data storytelling as well, we are typically referring to things like reports and dashboards. And you know that for you to have a report or for you to have a movie, you are going to have several scenes that will be played out in that your movie. And for you to also have a report or for you to have a dashboard, you are also going to create several scenes. And each of those scenes will typically be created with different types of visuals. Now, the final ingredient of data storytelling is going to be your audience, the people that have to go to the cinemas to go to watch the movies. But in this case, they are real human beings, and these people really just want to make better decisions. So you have to think about your data storytelling like this if you are going to, you know, create effective data stories, right? So think about it like a real story. Think about it like producing a movie, which basically means that you are standing as a storyteller. And if you think about it properly, if you look at this, my list of 4 items, what do you think comes first for you, the storyteller? What do you think comes first for you, the storyteller? Let me see what your opinions are. What comes first for you, the storyteller? Okay, so I see data. Any contrary opinion? Everybody says data. Yeah, the cast, the data, the cast, the data, the data, data, the data. All right. So let me ask again. So in a movie, what comes first for the storyteller in the movie? What's the first thing that comes first for the storyteller in the movie? Is it the cast or the story? Yeah, so the producer is the producer, right? So the first thing that comes is the story. The story always comes first, okay? So typically, there is always an objective for you to want to carry out a data project. That is your story. So there's always an objective that is attached to it. So nobody really starts by getting data and then starting to create things out of the blues. There is supposed to be like an objective that needs you to go to look at the data, and then you now want to use that data to produce something that is meaningful that people can take, can make better decisions from. So the story really is the first thing. And that's also going to make me to chip this in, that for data analysts and aspiring data analysts out there, when you work on any kind of data project, you have to focus more on the objective of your project, right? So you need to focus more on the story, because it is only when you understand the story properly, it's only when you understand the script, so to say, properly, that you are going to know what cast or which cast do you need to play each of the roles that has been scripted. So understanding of the objective is what usually comes first, which is part of the story. Then, as at that point in time, you would also have known what visuals you are going to use to convey that information. Because you have the scripts, then obviously that's why there's always a director that is going to direct the cast on how to trash out their roles, if I could use that word, right? So the story usually comes first, and then we can now talk about the audience. That's going to determine how we deliver the story. And then we can now talk about the data in the first place. And then at the end of the day, we can now shoot our scenes basically on your screen, right? So because the video that you see today, the movies that you see today, they are basically just the scripts having been shot and produced, right? So it always starts with the story, and we always need to remember that. Okay, now, data visualization tools. So whenever you want to, or whenever we want to create any story, we want to visualize data, there are different kinds of tools that we can use for our projects. And this is where I said everybody who answered no the first time should at least agree with me that they have used the first part before. Okay, so has anybody ever drawn a chart before, either on paper or something? I want to agree that we all have used charts before, isn't it? So for everybody that answered no before, can you change your no to yes? So if you typed no before, can you help me type no, change to yes? If you're one of those people that typed no before, I want to see if you have agreed with me, right? So help me to type no, change to yes. Excellent. All right, thank you. Okay, so when we think about data visualization tools, we have to know that there are traditional tools before the advent of technology, and we all must have used graph books before. I can't remember the code for graph books when we were in school, but at least every one of us took some mathematics courses. Even for some of us who did not like mathematics, it was one of the most compulsory courses out there. And it's the reason why some people eventually, when they get the opportunity to avoid mathematics, they explore that avenue to the fullest, right? This is not meant to shade anybody, it's just me catching cruise. So if you see anybody that has gone to read mass communication, mass comm, do we have anybody here that read mass communications? So for the mass comms people, mass comm, 99.99% of those people basically just ran away from mathematics. And that's just the truth, right? So mass communications, another set of people that ran away from mathematics usually are the lawyers. It's not like they like law so much, but somehow they have to avoid mathematics, okay? So at least we all agree now that we have used or we have created some kind of graphs before sometime, okay? Now we also have digital technologies as well. At least everybody or most people have Microsoft Excel, most people have Microsoft Office. And this reminds me of the first lie that every graduate tells. Every graduate tells this lie the first time on their CV. It's they're proficient in the use of Microsoft Office, right? Do you agree that you told that lie on your first CV? Agreed or not? Who agrees? Did you tell that lie on your first CV that you were proficient in the use of Microsoft Office? Just because you use Microsoft Word to type your project does not mean that you are proficient in the use of Microsoft Word, because these are supposed to be digital technologies, which means they are meant to help us to be more productive. So imagine drawing your charts on paper when you have a humongous data set versus using a digital technology to complete, the process, right? Now, many people back in the day would put on their CV just to be able to get that first shot at the interview, proficient in the use of Microsoft Office tools, Excel, PowerPoint, and Microsoft Word. But the truth is, if you leave them with Excel and PowerPoint, they are going to spend like 2-3 days or, spend eternity trying to produce a very, very simple result, right? That means instead of being productive with the tool, they are being much more unproductive with the tools. Okay, so but that aside, so for digital technologies that we can use for data visualization, there can be like 1 million different ones, but the popular ones that you're going to see around, today, Microsoft Excel. Most people have Office on their computers. Then there is Power BI, desktop. I'm very happy that the last session was presented by Mr. Microsoft Nigeria. In case you didn't know that name before, Mr. Microsoft Nigeria, that's the name. Olanrewaju Oyinbo. So he presented on Microsoft Fabric, and I believe that Power BI desktop is part of the family of Microsoft Fabric as well. Then there is Tableau, there is Click, there is Python if you want to write the codes, and there is also R as well. So these are different digital technologies that we can use for, carrying out data visualization. So for those people who were in the category of no earlier, that are shifting into the category of yes, these are some of the tools that you may want to look at. And for those other people who were already in the category of yes, you have to think about how many of these tools really do you know how to use. So if you want to increase your breadth, basically you want to be available for more opportunities, then you also have to try to gain proficiency in each of these tools so that you can be much more available and, to more opportunities, so to say. All right, so now to the key part of the presentation. How do we select the right visuals for effective storytelling? Now, first, we have to decide on the type of visual that we want to use. Now, if you remember, I think I mentioned that visuals can be anything in as much as the communication is coming from what you see. It is not coming from what you hear. That is audio and that is auditory. Visuals have to do with our eyes. So, and there can be like different categories of visuals that we have, and we need to know exactly what type is good for which situation, right? Now, sometimes we are trying to communicate just single numbers, right? Or maybe 1, 2, 3, or 4 numbers, just a couple of numbers is what we are trying to communicate. So in those instances, we can just write those things out. It doesn't have to be a chart. They don't have to be charts, okay? So I've seen a lot of people make these mistakes many times, thinking that, in as much as you have data to work with and you're supposed to deliver on something, then you must come up with charts every time. That is not the case. And this is also the reason why you need to understand the script even before you start. Because when you understand the script, you know what is required, then you can know how to present it clearly. Even though charts and graphs can be very, very fancy, they can also mislead, and they can, mislead people from the original goal, from the original target. So think about communication. Think about communication. Let's assume that this presentation is going to come from somebody that is called Honorable Patrick Obahia, I'm not sure how to pronounce it very well, right? So, but if you know that man, Honorable Patrick Obahia, let's just accept my pronunciation like that. If this presentation is coming from that man, if you are in this class for that presentation, then you are not going to be here to learn about visuals. You are going to be here to laugh, isn't it? Who knows the man I'm talking about? Do you know him? Anybody? Okay, so some people know him, right? So because his English vocabulary is not the regular and is not the everyday vocabulary, you are going to hear things that you've never heard before many times. So you will really not understand a lot of things that he's going to say, but you're going to find him very, very funny. So there are times when we need to use just simple English, just write out total sales or total revenue for the past year was 20% greater than our previous year, right? Or let's say total revenue for the current year is 20% greater than the previous year. You just write a simple text like that. If that is the information that you want to pass across, right? It can be easier to understand that way than trying to pull up a chart. Now, when you are pulling up a chart like that, you start to provide more information than is necessary. Now, always remember that in communication, less is more, right? So the lesser you speak, the better people are going to understand. Okay. So times when you need to present one or two numbers, you can just go to use simple text or simple cards. All right. Now, another type of visual that we also use are tables. We see tables a lot, and this is one of the visuals that is the most abused visual in the corporate world today, because everybody just creates tables every time, maybe because it is easy to create, I don't know, or maybe because that is what they made people creating. But we have to understand that tables are meant to solve certain kinds of data communication. Number one of them is when you are presenting to multiple audience profiles, okay? So for example, for those of us that went to school in the yesteryears, it's not like many years ago, but a lot of things have changed in a very short period of time. When we used to go to check our semester results on a board, so once results are out, it's not something you get to check on your phone or something you get to log into your portal and you're going to see your results. You basically will have to go to maybe the department where they are going to paste on paper everybody's results across the board. You need to go and look for your name. Now, for such kind of presentation whereby each individual or each of the audiences is only interested in finding information about themselves alone, that's an example of when you are going to use a table visualization. It's easier that way than for you to actually use a chart. Okay? As far as every member of that audience doesn't really care about every other person, they just want to understand what's happening to me, which means once you present the visual to them, they are going to look for themselves. So they just keep on scanning. The first one, they don't care. Second one, they don't care. Third one, they don't care, until they find information about themselves. Then they can read that information for themselves. So that's an example of when you are expected to use a table visualization. Another time you can use table visualization is when you are trying to show numbers that have high variance in units or high variance in the degree of units. Now, do we all remember tens and units? Do we all remember tens and units? Yeah, so let me put you to a small throwback test. So can you tell me, I don't know if my question is going to be correct, but can you list out to me tens and units that you know? I don't know if that's the right question, but you understand what I mean. So we all pass through the school together. So can I have that information? I want to write some of them out. Tens and units. Who remembers tens and units? 6 units. Okay. Tens. Yes, thank you. What else? After tens, what do we have? We have hundreds. Okay. After hundreds, we have thousands, we have millions, we have billions, isn't it? So those are tens of units. Now, imagine if you are trying to create a certain visualization that is going to show, let's say, for example, you want to plot this chart right now, and assuming on the chart, you are looking at 3 categories. So let's say, your chart axis on the y-axis starts from 0, and because you are presenting 3 categories, it simply means that maybe the first category happens to be like 500,000. So that means maybe that first category is going to be around here for 500,000. And then maybe the second category happens to be like 1 million. So obviously that second category is going to get somewhere here like this to represent 1 million. Now, if the third category you are presenting happens to be like 15, so you can understand the difference, the high degree of difference between those numbers. So if this is 500K and this right here is 1 million, where do you think 15 is going to be? Because obviously 250K is going to be somewhere around here. Now, if 250K is somewhere around there, 125K is going to be somewhere around here. If 125K is somewhere around there, 62,000 is going to be somewhere around here. If 62,000 is somewhere around here, then 31,000 is going to be somewhere around that place. You know how low do we have to go before we get to 15? It will really be insignificant, and I'm telling you for a fact that you will not see the bar for that particular number on this visual. That is because you are already presenting together in a single visualization numbers that have high variances in their degree of units. Okay, so second test. 15 falls in which of the category of tens and units? Second test. 15 falls in which of the categories of tens and units? In the tens. Thank you. So at least I'm helping you to remember these things just in case you have to do assignments for your younger ones or for your kids. Yeah. Okay. So you can thank me later for this, my throwback. All right. So that's our number 2 option. Now, number 3 option is related and it's also similar to the number 1 option for when you need to choose to use tables. And that is when your presentation requires looking up exact numbers. You have to look up the exact numbers. That means it is important the decision that needs to be taken relies heavily on seeing the exact numbers. So for example, let's assume that you work in an HR department of an organization and you are supposed to provide a report on the amount of taxes that is going to go to different states. So let's say that your organization has branches all over Nigeria, you have staff all over the 36 states of Nigeria, and you know that each state collects their own taxes. So you are the analyst, and part of the reports you are creating, part of the dashboard that you are building also involves creating something that shows the amount that should go to different state revenue services in Nigeria. Your audience for that particular report is probably going to be the financing or something like that. In that instance, you know that you have to provide something that displays the exact numbers. So like this, my diagram now, which is a chart that I just created now, you cannot use this one to say, okay, so we are sending this report to my finance team so that they can pay taxes to their different, pay the taxes to the different state revenue services. You say this is Lagos State and say this one is Rivers State, right? So this is not going to work because when you use charts like this, it has a different objective, which I'm going to talk about later. Using charts have different objectives. And the objective of using a chart for this visual that you see right now has already been met because it already shows that there are more of this particular number I'm presenting for Rivers than there is for Lagos. That's what this is about. And I can use a chart for something like this. However, where the exact numbers are required, then you are meant to use like a table visualization, right? Because first of all, it is important to see the exact numbers. And secondly, somebody really is going to look up for it. So like this, my example now, where you are trying to, the financing is basically going to be writing checks to each of those different state revenue services. So it means that they need to look up each of the states one by one for them to know the amounts to write on the checks, right? So this reminds me of a time I was, I was working in accounting sometime, and that's when I realized that there has to be a synchronization between your mind and your hand. So I'm giving you additional information again that you thank me for later. So you need to synchronize your mind and your hand when you write a lot. So at that point in time, I used to write a lot of checks as an accountant that we used to pay out to, to the banks at the end of the month for statutory payments. And I used to make the same mistakes every single month. So every month, I make mistakes on my checks every month. Every month, I make mistakes on my checks every single month, simply because I write very fast. Okay, so sometimes I write faster than I think, and that's a problem. So if you are like me, then anytime you write, make sure you always write slowly. Okay, so that's number 3 example of when you know to use a table. Then we'll also have maps visualization, and we'll use maps when we have to present something that has geographical distribution. Now, I have intentionally used the word distribution here because maps can also be abused sometimes. Because in as much as we are talking about visualization, the right visuals, effective storytelling, we want somebody to understand the information we are trying to pass across. And we also want to remember that we are playing to a script. There is already a script that we are trying to produce, and we must not deviate from that script. So maps can be abused sometimes because people tend to think that whenever they have any data category that contains geographical information, like states, like countries, they have to use maps. You only want to use a map in such situations when the story or when the message that you are trying to pass across needs to be read in terms of the variances of the numbers per state. When you put, like when you check the weather map, for example, they are going to show you on the weather map how maybe rainfall in this region, no rainfall in that region, because it is easier for you to understand it that way. Now, imagine trying to create a visualization that tells us something like maybe just a simple top 5 states by revenue, right? Just a simple top 5 states by revenue is what we are trying to communicate, and you go to put that inside a map visualization. That message can get lost in that map visualization. That message can also be more difficult to read and understand in that map visualization because you can easily use a different type of visual to convey that kind of information. So we use maps when we have to present data that have geographical information, and the information we are trying to communicate or we are trying to pass across has to do with the distribution of the numbers. Okay, now, finally, not like finally, but major finally, we have charts. So charts are used when we need to display trends or we have to show patterns. So which simply means we want to communicate the information by showing the trend or by showing the pattern without necessarily showing the exact numbers. So the exact numbers are not important, right? So think about the CEO of an organization that wants to see the performance of the maybe different products that is being sold in that organization. You don't want to present to the CEO and tell the CEO that we have 5 products. Our revenue for product 1 is 1,225,738 naira and 25 kobo. Product 2 is 800,000. That's really not important for the CEO because all that is going to be required is to display which product has the highest revenue versus the other products or things like that. Okay, so charts are used for displaying trends and also for showing patterns, and that usually forms like 80% of what we use for data visualization and data storytelling. But all the other 3 are also extremely relevant as well. All right, so I'm going to move on to my next slide, and maybe I'm going to ask a question about my previous slide before I proceed. All right, so let's say that I am the CTO. Okay, no, not me. Let's say you are the CTO of an organization, or let's use CDO now. So CDO, Chief Data Officer of your company, and then you are going into an executive meeting right now, and the CEO has requested that you come with some numbers into the meeting. Now, if the first number you're supposed to come up with into the meeting is to tell the entire board in the meeting to tell them the organization's market share. Okay, you are going to do a presentation on PowerPoint, for example, but part of the information you are presenting is the market share of the organization as at today, right? So what visual do you think is meant to be used to convey that kind of information? So you want to show the market share of my company, for example. So you are saying, okay, I won't say what you're saying, so you should know what you're saying. All right, so donut plots can be good for that. Numbers can be good, table can be good, charts can be good, cards can be good, okay? All right, so I see basically all the options because maybe context is lost in my question. So, but the thing is, if all we are trying to show, if all we are trying to communicate is our current market share, we just want to know, what's our current market share? What's our current market share? That's the information. Are we 2%? Are we 10%? Are we 50%? That's what we are trying to show, right? So in that instance, you know that you're supposed to be using a card visualization for something like that. Okay? All right, great. Now, let's also assume that in that meeting, you have different heads of departments. So there are different heads of departments in the meeting, and you have been able to compile the performances. You know, they have targets, they have KPIs. You have been able to compile the performances and the KPIs of those different, what's it called? Those different heads of departments, and you would like to share on one of your slides what the performances of those heads of departments are. And when you are presenting that slide, you are actually talking to the heads of department. So maybe there's an information you are passing across, and you are passing that information to the heads of department at that point in time. And part of what you are using to support your message at that point in time is the performances for the previous month. So what visual type do you think is going to make sense for that? Okay. Yeah. All right. So again, some part of the message will be lost in context. So but if you think about it, in as much as I'll be, you know, doing that presentation and all the heads of departments are there, and I'm just trying to talk about performances generally, and I just want them to know, because they probably don't have this information beforehand. This is the first time that they're going to be seeing that information, and they need to use it when they get back to their units or when they get back to their stations. Obviously, the table visuals is going to be the best to use in that situation, because the heads of department don't really care about the other people, because we are talking about targets, we are talking about KPIs, everybody, all man what? All man for himself. So when the situation is about all man for himself, you are thinking about using table visual. Just like the yesterday's example I gave you about about going to check results in the university. All man for himself when you're checking your results. So you only care for yourself at that point in time. Okay. Now, since charts, okay, somebody asked, what is card? All right, so a card visual is where you present a number. Like this is a chart, for example. So this one is a chart, but I talked about 20% market share, for example, and you know, there are visuals that look like a box like this, where you just write in 20%. So just like cards, you know, cards that we play, right? Cards that we play, what? Something like that. So that's a card visual, and it simply shows maybe one number, a couple of numbers only. All right. Okay. So since charts dominate data visualization, it's important for us to talk about how to choose the right chart. And this is important because every single chart type that you know out there has certain features that enable it to present information differently. And what I mean by this is I can present the same information using two different charts, and they are going to mean two different things. If I present that same information with two different charts, trust me, you know, they mean two different things, right? So let's take an example before I talk about the different types of reasons why we select our charts differently. So let's assume that we have these three departments. We are operating a school business. So we have a school and we have three departments in the school, and we have, students from each of those departments. So let's say this is department A, this is department B, and this is department C. So if we have something like, let's say we have something like 90 students in department A, and we have like, let's say we have like 30 students in department B. Then we have 60 students in department C, right? So we have 60 students in department C. When I present this visual to you like this, what's the information you get from this, apart from the fact that I have put in the exact numbers there for you to see, and you can do your own mental calculation, but let's assume that numbers are not there. I just use it as my own guide. If I was going to use these same charts as a different type of charts that is circular like this, a circle reminds us of what? What does a circle remind us of? Another throwback to maths. Circle in maths remind me of some things. Some things that circle reminds us of in maths. Okay, one of them is pie charts. Okay, give me another one. Mathematics. Thank you very much. 360 degrees, right? So a complete circle is 360 degrees, which simply means that what's the total sum of the numbers I have here? I think this is like 180. That means the complete circle, if I sum up all the numbers, it comes or totals to 360. So if I want to give you the portion of department A, drawing my pie charts, obviously half of this entire thing is going to be department A. Yeah? I'm with you.
Yeah, please, you have 2 more minutes.
2 minutes? Really? All right. Okay. Let's see how I can manage that. So half of it is going to be for department A, and then I have 30 and 60 to go. And out of that 30 and 60, out of this 30 and 60 now, maybe this is going to be for department C, and this is going to be for department B. Now, this tells a completely different story, because if you look at this now, you are going to see that the story you get from the first part is telling you that department A has the highest number of students, but the story you get from the second part tells you that half of the entire school students are in department A. So you see that the same information, 2 different visuals, and the communication are completely different from one another, right? So in selecting the right types of visuals, we have 4 major types of stories, or 4 major types of information we are trying to communicate. Just like in English language, there are different ways to split English language. Depends on what we want to talk about, but we can say there is past tense, there is present tense, there is future tense, and there are ways you have to use the languages to convey those different types of information. So when we are reporting data and when we are telling data stories as well, there are majorly these 4 types of storytelling that we have. Sometimes we are trying to understand measurements of categories from their highest to their lowest. So which category has higher number, which category has lower number. And when you want to do something like that, you are looking to make use of charts that differentiate categories based on their height or the length. Examples are bar charts, column charts, and line charts when it has to do with time period. So you use line charts for things that are periodic in nature. Then number 2 is ratio. And ratio is when we are trying to understand measurement portions owned by our data category, just like my example 2 that I just showed you now, where we are trying to figure out, so which department has, in proportion or proportional wise, which department has the highest number of students. And you want to use charts that divide a single object amongst the data categories. So if you look at the first chart, you are going to see that there are 3 different objects to talk about the different departments. But if you look at the second object, all the departments are inside one singular object. So we now have to cut, that singular object to display what proportion each one of them have. So if you are trying to tell a story that measures proportions, then you should be using charts like pie chart that is just one circle, donut chart that is also just one circle, and then we'll also have some 100% stacked bar charts as well, where you are going to have a lot of categories inside a single bar, and you split the bar based on the proportion that each one of them carry. We'll also have correlation when we are trying to understand measures that are related. So you are looking at two different numbers, price of petrol and price of food. Those are two different numbers, right? And we can say that they are correlated because if one of those prices go up, the other one go up. If one of those prices go down, the other one goes down in a normal economy. And you want to use chart that allows numbers on the X and Y axis, so you can show the relationship between those two numbers. Example is a scatter chart. Then we'll also tell stories from distribution perspective when we want to see how numbers are spread out amongst data categories. And in such instances, you can use charts that show gaps of numbers between different categories. You want to see, what is different between this number and that number. So you want to leverage charts like histogram, box plots, and heat maps. Okay, so I know I have like 2 minutes more. Let me just steal 1 more minute and show examples of these things. So very quick question. So my first chart is showing my gross sales by customer segment. This is Power BI, by the way. Gross sales by customer segment. Help me type, what type of story am I trying to tell here? Is it ranking? Is it ratio? Is it correlation? Or is it distribution? Very quickly, ranking, ratio, correlation, distribution. We have just 1 more minute. Okay, so ranking, ratio, correlation, distribution. Yeah, so this is a ranking visual because it quickly tells me which customer segment has the highest sales. I can see the ranking, I can see the ordering of how my customer segments are, from government being the highest to channel partners being the lowest. Now, my second visualization like this, the same information, gross sales by customer segment, but this is giving me something different. So is this ranking? Is this ratio? Is it correlation or distribution? So second visual using a pie chart. So this is basically ratio because I can see the proportion of sales that is coming from my different customer segments. Number 3, I have sales value and discounts by my data record that I have. So if you check, you are going to see that I'm showing discounts on one axis and I'm showing my gross sales on the other axis. What this means is when you look at this one, for example, it tells me that when the gross sales is like 1.2 million, I probably have given a discount of around 50,000 or something like that. So this is showing me the relationship between my gross sales and my discounts. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to leverage the shape or the pattern that this chart shows me so I can know whether it seems like whenever I have a higher gross sales, it tends to be like I also have a higher discount. So this is trying to show me what, very quickly, correlation, thank you. And then almost finally, sales by products and country. I'm trying to see the spread of the numbers, right? So if I look at Canada, for example, I want to be able to tell the differences between the sales of Canada, and if you check very well, you see that it heavily shows, or it shows heavily that one particular product right here is doing a lot more than the others. But when you look at Germany, since you don't see like different color grading in Germany and in France, for example, the colors are very close to one another. That tells you that each of these products are selling just close enough to one another, right? Unlike when you look at Canada and you see a very deep blue somewhere, that tells you that, one product is selling excessively higher than all the other ones, okay? Now, finally, just to key in the point as well, lastly, that we use charts to display trends and patterns, because if you look at my 2 divides of information that I have right here, they are almost the same information I have on both sides. But when you look at the left-hand side, it's showing me my gross sales before I gave out discounts, and then my discount that I've given out. Then I have, so this is my gross sales before discounts. Then I gave out this amount of discounts. And then this is my net sales after I've given out discounts. And this is how much it cost me to run that business, or how much it cost me, to make each of those sales. And at the end of the day, this is my profit. This gives you a different kind of information that doesn't have any pattern at all than what you see when you look at this, my funnel chart right here. Because looking at this funnel chart, it tells you that if I made a net sale of this big, and then my profit is this small compared to my net sales, then I have to do something about this. I need to go to look into something. Majorly, I will have to go to look at my cost of goods sold and find how I can reduce it, maybe increase my prices, and so on and so forth. Okay, and that will be all. If you have questions, I'll be glad to respond to them now. Okay, how can I visualize question and responses? Okay.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, for that very insightful session. I like everybody on the call to appreciate Ahmed. Let's throw in the emojis, the clap emojis, the fire emojis, as we show appreciation to Ahmed.